Recently, the great Islamic utopia of Afghanistan has been making Allah and his final messenger extremely proud. They are putting women in their God-given place of silence and obscurity, never to be seen or heard, as Allah intended. And that has put the spotlight on the glorious rights of women in the religion of peace. Let's talk about one of them, the empowering rights of women to receive a beating from their kind, loving, and devout Muslim husbands.
Surah An-Nisa says men can hit women. I mean, husbands can hit wife. This is if it's beneficial only, and hitting, it's not the hitting that we know. Hitting is like this. Let me show you. Like this. That's the hitting that's meant.
So beating women in Islam only applies to husbands beneficially hitting their wives in a seemingly pointless fashion. Okay, but he's not done.
And that's the last solution. The first solution is that if it's beneficial, you advise them, then you desert them, then you hit them, the one that I explained. And to whom? To a disobedient, bad wife, not to anybody when you feel like it.
Interesting. But before we take his word for it, let's read the Quran verse in question. Quran 4 verse 34. Men are the protectors and maintainers of women because Allah has made one of them excel over the other, and because they spend out of their possessions to support them. Thus, righteous women are obedient and guard the rights of men in their absence under Allah's protection. As for women of whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and remain apart from them in beds and beat them. Then if they obey you, do not seek ways to harm them. Allah is exalted, great. But if you use a translation like Yusuf Ali, the wife-beating part of the verse reads, as to those women on whose part ye fear disloyalty and ill conduct, admonish them first, next refuse to share their beds, and last beat them lightly. The translators added bracketed words like lightly in an obvious attempt to appeal to a Western audience. Every recognized English translation of the Quran uses beat, strike, or scourge in this verse. That's how it is understood. So where does this idea that the beating has to be lighter than a hit from a pillow fight come from? It certainly doesn't come from the classic understanding of how this verse was revealed. According to Al-Wahidi, a man slapped his wife and she complained about him to the Prophet. Her family who went with her said, "O Messenger of Allah, so and so has slapped our girl." The Prophet kept saying, "Retaliation, retaliation, and there is no other judgment to be held." But then this verse was revealed and the Prophet said, "We wanted something and Allah wanted something else." Okay, so a man slapped his wife across the face and she came with her family to Muhammad seeking retaliation, which he granted. But suddenly the angel Gabriel released a fresh update, Quran 4 verse 34, the verse permitting men to beat their wives. Muhammad wanted one thing, but Allah wanted something else. Somehow the Prophet had more compassion for women than his most compassionate God. We learn more about Muhammad's God from this hadith. The Prophet said, "Do not beat the female slaves of Allah." Then Umar came to the Prophet and said, "O Messenger of Allah, the women have become bold towards their husbands, so order the beating of them." And Muhammad obliged, and many women went around to the family of Muhammad. The next day he said, "Last night 70 women came to the family of Muhammad, each complaining about her husband. You will not find that those are the best of you." Okay, so here Muhammad changed his command on wife beating because his good friend asked him to do so. And as a result, 70 women came to report their husbands to Muhammad's family. And what did he say about it? You will not find that those are the best of you. Who? The wife-beating husbands or the punching bag wives? It has to be the wives, because Umar claimed that they had become bold towards their husbands, unbecoming of a believing woman. Quran 4 verse 34 in Sahih International. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, strike them as a last resort. The woman doesn't have to be arrogant. The husband just has to perceive her as arrogant. Just as Umar did, it's all up to the man. This hadith makes it clear. I was a guest at the house of Umar one night, and in the middle of the night, he went and hit his wife, and I separated them. When he went to bed, he said to me, "Oh Ashat, learn from me something that I had from the Messenger of Allah. A man should not be asked why he beats his wife." That's the golden rule of wife beating in the religion of peace. Essentially, don't stop a man from hitting his wife. And when Umar wasn't beating his wife, he was encouraging others to beat theirs. A man came to Umar ibn al-Khattab and said, "I have a slave girl and I used to have intercourse with her. My wife went to her and suckled her. When I went to the girl, my wife told me to watch out because she had suckled her." Umar told him to beat his wife and go to his slave girl because kinship by suckling was only by the suckling of the young. Yes, Umar prescribed a beating for a wife who tried to stop her husband from having non-consensual sex with his slave girl. But there is more. This hadith narrates, Umar said, "I will say something which would make the Prophet laugh." So he said, "Messenger of Allah, I wish you had seen the treatment meted out to the daughter of Khadija when you asked me for some money." And I got up and slapped her on her neck. Allah's messenger laughed and said, "They are around me as you see, asking for extra money." So Muhammad's response to his friend Umar beating Khadija's daughter was to laugh and report his wives to this friend. And what did his friends do? Abu Bakr then got up, went to Aisha and slapped her on the neck. And Umar stood before Hafsa and slapped her, saying, "You ask Allah's messenger which he does not possess." And they said, "By Allah, we do not ask Allah's messenger for anything he does not possess." Then Muhammad withdrew from his wives for a month or 29 days. So the final prophet of Allah allowed his friends to slap his wives because they were asking him for extra money. Then he remained apart from them in beds for a month as further punishment for their perceived arrogance. And according to Aisha, the messenger of Allah never beat any of his servants or wives, and his hand never hit anything. And still, the same Aisha narrated that one night the prophet caught her spying on him and he struck her on the chest, which caused her pain. What can we expect from the child bride of Allah's final prophet? Her husband taught her the act of self-contradiction. Her awesome contribution to her husband's ministry are brilliant statements like this. Aisha said that the lady came wearing a green veil and complained to her, Aisha, of her husband and showed her a green spot on her skin caused by beating. So when Allah's messenger came, Aisha said, "I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman. Look, her skin is greener than her clothes." And that's a beautiful description of the state of Muslim women, which continues to be true about them 1400 years later. But the story continues. When Abdurrahman heard that his wife had gone to the prophet, he came with his 2 sons from another wife. She said, "By Allah, I have done no wrong to him, but he is impotent and is as useless to me as this," holding and showing the fringe of her garment. Abdurrahman said, "By Allah, O Allah's messenger, she had told a lie. I am very strong and can satisfy her, but she is disobedient and wants to return to Rafaha, her former husband." And that's a good reason for him to beat his wife until her skin turns green. What would the feminist judge of 7th century Arabia say? I can imagine him scolding the man and comforting the woman, right? Well, Allah's messenger said to the woman, "If that is your intention, then know that it is unlawful for you to remarry Rafaha unless Abdurrahman has had sexual intercourse with you." Did he just ignore the fact that she has been beaten till her skin turns green? But wait, maybe he's about to address that next. Then the prophet saw 2 boys with Abdurrahman and asked him, "Are these your sons?" On that, Abdurrahman said, "Yes." And the prophet told the woman, "You claim what you claim, that he is impotent, but by Allah, these boys resemble him as a crow resembles a crow." Oh! A wisdom greater than that of Solomon has spoken. Who cares that this woman has been beaten mercilessly by her husband? What matters is that the man, the wife beater, isn't impotent. But see, other hadiths report Muhammad as saying that husbands shouldn't beat their wives or strike them in the face. But was that before or after Umar, the professional wife beater, made Muhammad change his mind? Thankfully, in Muhammad's final sermon, before Allah severed his ayota, he clarified his position on wife beating. "Fear Allah regarding women, for you have got them under Allah's security, and you have the right to intercourse with them by Allah's word. It is a duty from you on them not to allow anyone whom you dislike to lie on your beds. But if they do, beat them, but not severely." In other hadiths, his words were reported as "with a beating that is not harmful or without causing injury or leaving a mark." But what does that mean? Thus far, it doesn't exclude a slap across the face, a slap across the neck, a strike on the chest that causes pain, or a beating that leaves bruises that turn the skin green. Muhammad wanted to liberate women, but Allah and Umar had other plans. But somehow, Allah is the most compassionate, right? He also claims that his revelation to Muhammad confirms the Torah and the Gospel. Yet nowhere is wife beating permitted in the Bible, not even in the Torah, which contains very harsh laws. Rather, Ephesians 5 verse 25 says, "Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her." Verses 28 and 29 says, "So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church." My Muslim friends, how long will you ignore or justify the brutality towards women commanded by your compassionate God? When you're done making excuses for a 7th century Arabian cult, Jesus will be at the door of your heart waiting for you. Meanwhile, instead of hitting your wife, hit the like button, not severely, okay? Admonish the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. And as a last resort, check out this video that explains Allah's master plan for those dumb enough to trust him.